Okay, now back to one of our top stories. Yesterday's Democratic presidential debate in Charleston, South Carolina. All the candidates came out swinging against frontrunner Bernie Sanders, who spent a lot of time defending his policies and ideology. Here to help us break down the debate and all the fiery exchanges from last night is Ed O'Keefe, who is still in Charleston. Ed, thank you so much for joining us. So listen,
I thought you were going to say I was still awake, Anne-Marie.
Well, I actually was going to compliment you on being sort of awake and upright, and I know you're about to give us great answers for all the people who missed the debate, which is all three accomplishments, bravo. Okay, so at times the debate felt like, many of the candidates were making their last stand before Saturday's primary. Did anyone succeed in moving the needle, though, in terms of support?
Well, and not only Saturday's primary, but next Tuesday's primaries, plural, in 14 states across the country. And I think that's where a lot of the desperation really lies. This cake is essentially baked. Former Vice President Biden, Senator Sanders, Tom Steyer appear to be your 1, 2, 3. Needle hasn't really moved on that in several weeks. It would be really intriguing if that does happen before Saturday. But those Super Tuesday contests across the country, where you got more than 1,300 delegates at stake, nearly a third, almost, depending on how you do the math, and really one of the last opportunities for someone to try to catch or surpass Bernie Sanders. That's where a lot of that was coming from. Who did the best? Hard to say. If you're in the do no harm department, though, Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders clearly survived and thrived in that regard, and probably, again, maintained their lead here in South Carolina and potentially helped themselves across the country. Telling that in our post-debate snap poll that we did, Sanders was seen as most impressive, followed by the former vice president and then Senator Elizabeth Warren.
So Bernie Sanders took some significant incoming. How did he defend himself?
By doing what he always does, just defending and explaining, as he does, his record. No wavering whatsoever expected on any of those positions that he takes. And I think what's sort of beginning to happen for him is that either people are taking him seriously or people are listening more closely than they have before. And he is doing his best to try to explain and defend the various positions that he has. And, we'll see. But the fact that suddenly he wins those or does well enough in those first three contests, and the polls are now beginning to show him in the lead, suggests the Democrats may be coming around to it, regardless of the fact that he's a self-described democratic socialist, regardless of the fact that he's someone that many Democrats, certainly in leadership positions, have concerns about. And we'll see, as numbers are tabulated here in the coming days after this debate and ahead of South Carolina, whether he enjoys any kind of a bump.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that at one point he almost seemed to be arguing with members of the audience. He received a couple of boos, and I thought to myself, well, this guy's the front runner. Is this an indication, the behavior that we're seeing with the audience, is this an indication of perhaps how divisive he might be? And maybe there's something to what some of the other candidates have said about him. I'm thinking about Pete Buttigieg, saying that he can't sort of bring in others who aren't already in his coalition.
Well, two things on that. First of all, each of these campaigns had a few dozen of their supporters in the room. Clearly, the Biden and Bloomberg supporters especially were told and were a little more vocal than the rest. Second, I think the senator was struggling to adapt to being in a room of thousands that weren't necessarily all there cheering for him.
Right. So you talked about Biden at least not doing any damage. He promised that South Carolina would be his firewall, that he was going to win. But Sanders has overtaken him nationally among African American voters. Which I guess would be the counter argument to those who say he has a limited reach outside of his coalition. He's not that popular because obviously he's pulling new people into his tent. If Biden wins, but it's a slim win on Saturday, could it still be considered a win for him? Or for him, because he made South Carolina such a big deal, could even a win be a loss?
Well, that's probably a question more for an Antoine or a Leslie or a Linda. A win will be a win. I think where you can measure the potential effects of it being closer rather than larger is in the delegate count.
Right.
Does the delegate count get split such that essentially Biden, Sanders, and Steyer are all being served the same kind of sandwich? Or is Biden getting a larger meal out of a win in South Carolina. I say this as Antoine Seawright stares at me and nods in approval because he's up later, but it's something he would say. And the point being that ultimately this is a delegate race. Okay, well, he might get the same answer. But I mean, you essentially, the delegate count is what matters.
Yeah.
An overwhelming win gets you an overwhelming, collection of delegates in each state. So if it's a closer win, obviously, it may be a more split pie, and that'll be concerning for the Biden camp and for those that want to try to at least slow down Bernie Sanders.
Okay, so very, very quickly before you leave, there's a lot of talk about how Bloomberg has to perform better because his performance during the last debate wasn't so great. How did he perform?
Better. Was it a knockout blow and sort of redeeming for him? Not necessarily, but I think, the rehearsals that he did, the fact that he and his team spent 4 days trying to brush up showed to some extent. He just can't explain away, and he's not going to be able to, the concerns about what he did and said with former employees and non-disclosure agreements. He's not going to be able to erase his record on stop and frisk, though he did a pretty decent job last night of explaining that and other things he did as mayor and trying to remind people that, yes, he's a successful guy, but has, donated significant sums of his money not only to charitable causes, but also to the Democratic Party.
All right, Ed, some of those questions I am going to ask Antoine to elaborate on. Ed O'Keefe, thank you very much.
Take care.
All right, so don't forget, we have you covered all week long as candidates make their final pitches to voters ahead of Saturday's crucial primary in South Carolina. CBSN will also have a live results show this Saturday, and you can stream that right here on CBSN at 6 p.m. Eastern.